What's up, guys? I'm Uncle Freedom, coming to you on a glorious and well-deserved day off. How's it going? First thing, y'all go ahead, like, subscribe, share, tell a friend, because that, after all, is how we defeat the algorithm and get more 2A content out to like-minded individuals and convert more individuals that are maybe on the fence to people like us. So, like, subscribe, follow another YouTuber, go check out some of the people I really enjoy, like Modern Tactical Shooting or Magic Prepper. Guys are awesome. I love what they do. Even Tactical Considerations. Mike out there hanging out. I like the way he puts his stuff together. And if you really want a good trip and learn some really in-depth stuff, RDR Gear is a great channel as well. Truly enjoy those guys. Watch almost every video they release. So, and biggest shout out to the people that support me the most right now, OutlastSupply.com. If you are looking from anything, from optics to flashlights to survival food to tools to water filtration to comms, man, they're your people. OutlastSupply.com, fantastic folks, and I truly appreciate the support they give me to do what I do. So, if you watched the last rifle video, you know we talked about the 7.62 by 39. Yeah, right? AK guys, rejoice. So you knew the next one. You knew what I was going to talk about. The 5.45 by 39. I will tell you, in doing more research to do this video, I realized there was stuff I did not know. A lot, actually, that I did not know. And as a cartridge nerd, that just shocked me. So, if we look at the AK-74 on paper, if we start looking at the AK-74 itself and the 5.45 by 39, we all know that it was introduced in 1974 to go with the AK-74. But what if I told you that's not where this story started? Not even close. Like insanely not even close. The story begins, we got to jump in that Wayback Machine that I talk about in these videos, and we need to roll all the way back to the late 1950s. In the late 1950s, the Ruskies had heard tale that America was beginning to do their normal American exceptionalism, gun-loving stuff, and, well, they were testing out a new automatic AR-15 and a new caliber from Remington, 5.56. By the end of 1959, Soviet engineers had in their possession two of the experimental 5.56 cartridges that would later be called the M193, or the 55-grain full metal jacket that we all know and love. This is the start of a journey that would take almost 10 years to completely develop. And it took so long because Niet Rifle is Finakov forced the engineers to look for something in the middle, right? They wanted kind of this golden middle ground between very conflicting design requirements, which is the most Russian thing I have read today. On one hand, they wanted reduced bullet dispersion, which means smaller groups, and a better hit ratio, which would typically mean we needed to reduce velocities, reduce some powder, and kind of do it, and reduce recoil, because that's how we achieve those things. But they were also told that they needed increased lethality and better penetration, which means heavier bullets, more recoil. So one side said less recoil, the other side, no, more faster heavy bullets equals more recoil. So they were told to do both of these things, which is not just a Russian thing I've read. That's like the most government thing I've read in a minute. And they were trying to find something in the middle. How do we do this and not get disappeared? Because that's what happened to people back then. And how do we do this also enough so that we don't get disappeared on the other side of it? So Ivan got creative, and Ivan started necking down the good God, come on, AK round, where'd you go? All right, so they started necking down the 7.62 by 39 to accept a painstakingly recreated American style 5.6 bullet, 5.56, right? And they twisted up some barrels for their new rifles in a similar twist rate to us, which was the 1 in 12. So for those of you that don't know, this will get covered a lot more in the 5.56 video. The 1 in 12 twist with a 55 grain is what made it devastating. The 55 grain is not a devastating round. In fact, we overstabilize it at 1-7, and sometimes it just ice picks. But it is still a better option than 8.55. But I'm not going to go any further down that rabbit hole. If you want to see that, just wait till the 5.56 video, which should be like 4 from now. So they recreated our twist rate. They tried to recreate our bullets, and they necked down, because even the Russians do it, 7.62 by 39. It was noted that the slower twist rate of 1 and 12 and the shape of the original 5.56 193 projectiles were highly unstable. But as I've said before, they're also very inconsistent in how they became unstable and the damage that they did. That led Ivan to determine that the results weren't conclusive, repeatable, and they abandoned trying to create and clone that great sweet stoner magic. Somebody's going to not know what that was. Eugene Stoner, he invented the AR. So the Russians designed an insanely streamlined bullet, man. So they decided to do their own stuff, right? They were like, all right, this doesn't work, so we're going to make our own. So they designed just an insanely streamlined bullet. Just why? I mean, that's not even a question, man. That is an insanely streamlined bullet profile. So they made this incredibly streamlined bullet, and then they optimized like trajectory and recoil impulse. Like, okay, how do we get it to go flatter for farther, and how do we not make it kick as much so that people are more accurate, making the shots group tighter, right? Eliminating some things. And that led to the development of actually new powders, right? Because necessity is the mother of invention and the mother of innovation. They needed something, so they had to make it to get what they wanted out of it. And not like this pushed the change, like not only of the projectile and the powders, but when they started loading everything up, it led to the change of the case itself. They wanted better in-flight ballistic characteristics, so what they had to do to streamline that bullet was lengthen this bullet out a lot. And they had to fill the core. So they actually decided instead of using lead in the core, they would use a mild steel core, because that would be less weight, allow them to create the core and have a longer, more streamlined projectile. And then throw on that bimetal jacket that we all know and love to be tougher than the standard alloy, because they did not like the alloy that we used on our bullets. They did not like the propensity that our bullet had to fragment. Yawing was okay, but coming apart was bad. So they did not like the way they do it. So they went with the bimetal jacket. In case you're wondering where that came from, now you know. They wanted to have a tougher bullet, so to speak. So just the generation of this so far, and we're nowhere near fielding it yet. We've already changed. We've created a new profile projectile from scratch. We've done all this stuff. We've changed the case diameters. We've developed new powders to get what we want. We've started steel coring bullets, and we made them super tough so that they would stay together when they hit things. As a result, the final actual bullet for this guy was 25.55 millimeters long, or 1.005 inches for people that won world wars, and 3.4 grams, or again, 52 grains for people that have walked on the moon. So their amazing thing. This is actually a 53 grain projectile. This 53 grain projectile is longer than a 77 grain Match King. Super efficient bullet, like scary efficient bullet. So that was set. Die was struck. Okay, we know what we're going to do. So the first 2 million rounds of this that they produced were just neck down 7.62 by 39 cases. And as it turns out, the Russians were also wildcatters like the Americans were, and well, they necked things down. So the Russian public, and well, probably not just the public, they were necking down the 7.62 by 39 and necking it down to 5.6 before we did ours, and before the Russians tried to re-engineer our crap. They were already shooting a neck down 7.62 known as the 5.6 by 39, and it was chambered in what was known as the Bars-1 hunting rifle. Which was a very common bolt-action rifle that had heavier game loads for wolf and deer and stuff, and then lightweight varmint loads for doing. So they already had kind of thing, and they'd already necked down and wildcatted and standardized on a hunting cartridge made from their service cartridge. So it's actually pretty cool. But if you noticed, I said in here that it was chambered in a bolt gun. That was the problem. So the aggressively tapered and sloping 7.62 by 39 brass, when fired in full auto, which was the purpose design driven thing for this, they had a real problem. Like, it didn't work well at all. It did not cycle the way it was supposed to because it was hyper neck down. So we basically created like this dagger looking thing. Why did it work in the hunting variant? Because it was a bolt action, right? We don't have to do reliable cycling and feeding. It's a bolt gun. But when stuck into a magazine fed fully automatic assault variant like we had with the AK, now, by the way, in case you're wondering, AKs, like real AKs, are in fact assault rifles. You know why? Because they're full auto. The crap we buy that semi-auto is not. It's just an AK. It's semi-auto. It's not an assault rifle. Please learn terminology and stop repeating what people say. But when they started looking at this, they realized that because of the new powders that they had actually developed for this thing, we didn't need all this chunky space. We actually needed... We could do the same velocities, not sacrifice any performance, and we could do it in a smaller case that reliably cycled in a full auto firearm. So they narrowed down the head diameter, which also meant we had more meat on the bolt that we had. So we had a tougher bolt. So we narrowed down the head diameter. We narrowed down the body of the case itself. And we didn't impact our velocity window we were trying to do, which is the reason that 5.45 mags are much more straight AR-15 kind of curve versus an AK mag that looks like a banana. That is actually how we ended up with that. With the final measurement across the lands, which is the opposite of what we do, which is from the grooves, giving it its 5.45 size. So the lands are the parts that are raised in the barrel that grip the bullet. Between those lands is 5.45 millimeter. Even though the bullet itself is a .222 diameter projectile. So an AR-15 is a .224 projectile. The actual diameter of a bullet for an AK-74 or the 5.45 is actually a .222 or 223. Right. You can get away with 223s in them. And we had an overall case length for this guy, or a case length for it at 39.82 inches, which we just rounded down to the 5.45 by 39. So that now we have the baseline, right? We've created the projectile, the powder that we needed. We've realized we could shrink the case to make it more efficient, making it feed more reliably and better. We made it we've already got the magazine thing sorted out. We've created a more robust bolt. Like, we've done all of this just in the development of trying to recreate what we did. Now, the Russians got some firsthand experience, right? So the Russians were a friend of the enemies of the communist sympathizers in Vietnam. So they actually got firsthand experience with us shooting a highly unstable 55 grain projectile that was just ripping through things. So they knew that what we did was the right answer. Okay, so they knew that that was the future of warfare. It was less recoil, it was more accurate, it was faster, it did all of these things better than the 7.62 by 39, and it was going to be the new hotness. Now they've got a case, they've got a bullet, they've got the powders designed, they've got the bolt, they've got the magazines. We're ready to rock and roll, right? So at about the same time as this standard bullet was being designed, they were actually doing parallel developments for specialty rounds for the 5.45. Some of those rounds we'll come back to in a minute. But how did we get here? So in 1974, the 7.6, the round that was banned by the ATF for import, and we were told we couldn't have it because we were not responsible enough to own a freaking bullet. I hate government sometimes. Anyway, so this is the round, the 7.6. Back in the day, we used to be able to buy them in Spam cans. Now we can't sell kidneys to get them. But that was the original round. 1974, it was officially adopted. The 7.6 projectile, along with the 7T3, which was a tracer, the 7U1 Subsonic, that's cool, and the 7KH3, which was a blank round, and a 7KH4, which was a training round. Now this is where it actually gets awesome. We've gone through the history, but this just gets way cooler after we go through this. So despite how you may feel about the Russians, I will be the first to admit that the 545x39 development is a master class in ballistic science, purpose built to deliver the hurt with as little work and as little recoil as humanly possible. This is a master class on how to develop a combat round. The way they did this. The bullet design is one of the coolest things that have ever happened, and consequently is one of the reasons that hollow point boat tails do anything, because we straight jack that too. So the 7N6. 7N6, 52 grain, 1 inch long boat-tailed bullet with a Soviet Type 10 steel core. That was just their name for their steel. It had a the core on the inside had a flat nose. Now, what you basically have in here is you have this long bullet, right? The steel core is in here, but before the tip of the bullet, which this is a full metal jacket, right? So there's a hollow cavity behind the tip of the bullet inside of the jacket. So that means we have weight rearward, a hollow cavity, and then the point of the bullet. It's literally it's designed to like war crime without expanding, right? Because we can't use expanding or flattening projectiles in international warfare because of the Hague Convention. So they abided by the Hague, but they created the new war crime variant of the bullet that didn't ever expand. It was purpose-built and designed because of that weight rearward to become incredibly unstable the second it encountered hydrostatic media, which you're made of mostly water, and it would violently tumble and yaw, creating insane wounding characteristics and cavities. And that is 100% the reason that round is so awesome. It has nothing to do with the mild steel core. It's the design. Like I said, masterclass in terminal ballistics and developing a round for a single purpose. That is the result of it. And it's so cool that they did this. And consequently, when we look at boat tail hollow points over tip match, we have all the weight rearward, a hollow cavity before the open knee plat of the bullet, which leads to what? Highly unstable entry into hydrostatic medium, causing violent tumbling. The difference is the thin jacket on ours separates and frags into everything. So going away from that, or actually looking at that, the first time this round was officially fielded, really in combat, was at the Graveyard of Empires known as Afghanistan, where the Soviets got the crap kicked out of them by the same goat farmers that probably kicked our ass a lot of the times in those mountains that we knew very little about. And it earned its nickname, though, because it was so nasty. It earned the nickname by the Afghan people of the poison bullet. So the 7N6, the poison bullet, that is actually its nickname. It's a, like I said, I am in awe of how this projectile was made. I'm a fan of a lot of Russian things. I'm very interested in the Soviet Russia and the Cold War. I'm a history guy. I like that stuff. But I'm also, being a ballistics nerd, that is one of the coolest things design standpoint wise. You're talking about a purpose-built, devastating round only meant to do one thing. It's just cool, right? So going away from the 7N6, we can go to the 7N6M. So the 7N6M, instead of using the standard Type 10 steel that we had in the 7N6, we actually used a hardened steel that went into the inside, and they adopted it in 1987, and it was adopted as an improved penetration round, though it was never actually reclassified. So you can pick up any 7N6, and you may have the 7N6 with the steel, the hardened steel core, but there's no identifiers either in the name, the nomenclature, the spam can, or on the case. So you would actually never know unless you cut it apart, because it was never officially reclassified. Then you move on to the 7N10. Now the 7N10 is kind of a weird anomaly, and if you have some 7N10, you are a very lucky human being, because it is insanely rare. The 7N10 was developed as an armor, as armor improved across the battlefield, and we started seeing things like titanium plates become pretty common. Factory number 270, because that's how we do it, which is one of like the 5 or 7, whatever, or one of 7 factories that produced ammo, the 545 ammo. So factory number 270 developed a new pointed core. So instead of that flat steel core that we actually had a hardened 75 high carbon steel pointed core. Same hollow cavity, all the same cool stuff we had. And it was just slightly heavier when we did it. And so they just kind of eyeballed it, put a little more powder. So when I say slightly heavier, we went from like 52 to 54 grains. But I don't want to say sadly. I would have loved to see where this would have gone. But the Iron Curtain fell, which was good for all of humanity and the rest of the world. And when the Iron Curtain fell, the ability to create that round was lost and was never replicated by the other 6 factories that made it. And after that happened, Russian developers kind of scrambled to create their own variant of the 7N10 round. That's why I say it's insanely rare. They don't exist. You probably don't have any in your collection. I know I do not. I would love to have a 7N10 in my stuff. I've got a lot of other stuff from them, but I don't have a 7N10. Then your next up will be the 7T3. The 7T3 is the Green Tracer, which took almost as long to develop as the standard 7N6 round. Now, the reason it did that is because you got to think at this point, everything's 30 cal or 0.311 diameter, and we have like a lot of room to put the tracer compound. You don't have that in the 545 round. So they were actually having to put the tracing compound into the jacket itself versus in a little cup at the bottom. A containment cap or cup is what it was common at the time to do. Then you move into what becomes the coolest crap ever done for this, and that is the 7U1. Just like the 7.62 video where I talked about the fact that Crazy Ivan was strapping cans and running Subsonic 7.62x39 rounds, which is just awesome, and not the 9x39. I'm talking about 7.62x39 Subsonic rounds. It's even crazier in the 5.45. So they also developed the PBS, so noise and flameless, PBS-4 suppressor. And alongside that, the silent bullet. They created a subsonic, highly accurized 5.45 round and an accompanying PBS, noise and flameless can. The package was known, I got to read my notes because there's a lot of numbers here. The package was known as the AKS-74UB and was designated the 6P27 and was only available to the KGB, the MVD, the Ministry of Defense for the USSR. And what's even wilder, like this gets crazy, is this could be equipped with a suppressed grenade launcher. Oh wait, that's cool. Did it work? Who knows? By God, that's cool though. So it could be equipped with the BS-1M, otherwise known as the Canary, which was a modification of the BS-1 Tishina, or silence, that used a special 5.45 blank cartridge, kind of like we had rifle-launched grenades in World War II, where we used rifle grenade blanks in the M1 Garand. I have boxes of those. Really cool stuff. They did this with the 5.45. So again, it wasn't groundbreaking. We were already doing it. And it fired a 30-millimeter non-propelled, shape-charged, armor-piercing incendiary grenade known as the 7P25. The actual pictures of this rifle are insane. Like the swag and drip that comes from an M16 A4 A2 with a 203, or a real M4 with a 203 and a quadrant sight and a leaf sight and an ACOG with a piggybacked RMR on it. That level of sex appeal existed in the Soviet and the Russian era, but it was this rifle. It's so cool. It's a whole different video all unto itself. I don't have access to that. Ian probably does. So again, like this shit's wild. We're doing some crazy stuff. So the 7U1 was actually an 80 grain projectile with a tungsten core to increase the density and weight, doing 984 feet per second. And it utilized pistol powder. This is something we do to this day. Hand loaders have long known about using pistol powder and stuff to create subsonic loads in rifles. We've always been able to do it, but they figured out how to do it, well, on paper. It did it, it cycled reliably, and they were fielding cans. That's just freaking awesome, right? I would love to see a 7U1 round, like a subsonic 5.45. That would just be cool. And that was actually a real designator, so it was on the spam can. There was even a short-lived biathlon rifle. So back in the day, the Ruskies were super into the Olympics. Biathlon was kind of their thing. Shooting was kind of their thing. But they had a biathlon rifle known as the 5.6 Biathlon. That was never a success, though. And the reason it was never a success is because the larger calibers were not used in biathlon, like, by the time it was completed. So we never actually saw it get fielded. But on paper and in the pictures I've seen, those are actually pretty cool looking. But it shot the same stuff. So when we talk about the 5.45 by 39, there's a ton of history that I didn't even know about. And when we look at them from the alpha variants of today to the RPK 74, the PDP, the PDW, known as the Crink by everybody, the 5.45 was a really fantastic purpose-built war round. It's just like, that's what it was made to do. And it had some of the coolest guns ever created. And it also boasted like a 12,000 round average barrel life, which was unheard of. That's awesome. Like, that is just cool. We were launching these projectiles at like almost 3,000 feet per second. They were more accurate than the AK, the 7.62 by 39. They were flat, devastating, more devastating, bar none, than the 7.62 by 39. Because of the actual design of the bullet. I can't get that out there enough. They designed almost ballistic perfection for the purpose they made it for. And that is just so cool to people like me that are ballistics junkies. But sadly, with the stop in the Russian imports, our days of buying $100 spam cans of 7.6 at your local gun store and burning it down over the weekend are over. And that's saddening to me. I was buying that stuff for dirt cheap. I talk about it in the 7.62 by 39 video. It was an awesome time to be a gun guy in America. And unfortunately, those days are gone. And if I knew what I knew now then, I'd be sitting on a throne made of spam cans of 7.62 by 39 and 5.45 by 39, propped up next to my crates of Type 56s and AK-74s. It's just fact. But there is a small light that exists for those 5.45 fanboys out there, and that is that companies like Hornady are making things like their steel match line, which is shooting a 60 grain VMAX, which is a devastating round. That is a flat, amazing defensive built round. It will never be as amazing as the 7.6, but for what we've got available to us, that's a really amazing option. And now we've got companies like AAC spinning up production of steel case 7.62 and 5.45 ammo. So I really hope that one day soon I'm able to dust off, my 74s and just go do some shooting without constantly counting it in dollar bills every time I shoot around. That would be pretty awesome. And I mean, being able to go out and do that again with what still remains one of the best, if not the best, purpose designed combat cartridges ever made. I bet you didn't see it going this way. But if you want an honest opinion, like the original 7.6 5.45 by 39 is one of the best, if not the best, purpose-designed combat rounds ever freaking created. It's a cool thing. Hopefully you guys learned something cool today. So as always, guys, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Until next time, I'll see you later.